Victoria, you're trending. Jade held up her phone, the screen glowing in the dim light of my husband's office. I could see my own face on the video, grainy footage of me at the grocery store, hair unbrushed, still in my yoga pants. Divorced and desperate, a thread, the caption read. She tilted the screen toward Marcus, my husband, who sat behind the mahogany desk that used to be my mother's. He laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. Block her, babe. She's irrelevant now. I stood in the doorway, invisible to them, my visitor's badge clipped to my coat. Security had stopped me at reception, insisted I needed an escort to visit my own husband. The building my mother built, and I wasn't allowed to walk freely through its halls. 4 years. That's how long I'd been gone. 4 years since I walked away from my CFO position to care for my mother through stage 4 pancreatic cancer. 4 years since I'd trusted Marcus to protect her legacy while I held her hand through chemotherapy, through the bad days and the worst days, through the final goodbye in a hospice room that smelled like lavender and death. The company Nexus AI, a chatbot platform my mother had built from nothing in her garage, had been my life before it became my sacrifice. I'd been there for every pitch, every investor meeting, every late night debugging code and balancing budgets. Marcus had joined as a sales director 7 years ago. Charming and ambitious, the kind of man who could sell ice to Alaska. I'd fallen for his confidence, his drive. My mother had liked him too, promoted him to COO when we got married. He'll take care of things, she'd said, squeezing my hand from her hospital bed. Trust him. I'd trusted him. And now here I was, 6 months after burying my mother, standing outside his office while his 28-year-old head of marketing showed him videos mocking me online. How many views? Marcus asked, leaning forward with interest. 112,000, Jade said, her voice bright with satisfaction. The comments are brutal. Someone made a meme comparing her to Miss Havisham. Who? Great Expectations. The crazy lady in the wedding dress? Jade laughed. Anyway, it's perfect timing. The board meeting's in 2 weeks. If anyone questions why we're moving forward with the acquisition, we can point to her as evidence of instability. The grieving widow who can't handle reality. My stomach turned. Acquisition. The anonymous email I'd received 3 days ago suddenly made terrible sense. The attachment had shown internal documents, proof that Marcus wasn't preparing for an IPO like he'd told the board. He was selling Nexus AI to a Chinese tech conglomerate for parts, planning to strip the assets and walk away with millions. The Chen family's 40% won't matter once we convince the board this is the best path forward, Marcus continued. And Henry will vote with me. He's my father, family loyalty and all that. My hands clenched around the strap of my purse. Henry. My father-in-law. I'd always thought we had an understanding, a mutual respect. He'd been at my mother's funeral. Told me she'd have been proud of me for putting family first. Had that all been performance? Speaking of family, Jade purred, walking around the desk to perch on the edge, her hand trailing along Marcus's shoulder. When are you going to finalize the divorce? I'm getting tired of being the secret. After the deal closes, Victoria's shares complicate things. I need to make sure she doesn't have any legal grounds to contest the sale. Her mother left her 40%, but if I can prove she's mentally unfit to make business decisions. He trailed off, gesturing to Jade's phone. Hence the social media campaign. My heart hammered against my ribs. They weren't just stealing my mother's company. They were trying to paint me as incompetent, unstable, unfit, systematically destroying my reputation so no one would listen when I objected to the sale. I backed away from the door, my visitor's badge feeling like a scarlet letter. The security guard at the end of the hall was watching me with mild curiosity. I forced a smile, waved, and walked toward the elevator with measured steps. Only when the doors closed did I allow myself to lean against the wall, my breath coming in short gasps. The elevator descended, and with each floor, my shock crystallized into something harder, colder. 4 years ago, I'd been one of the most respected CFOs in Silicon Valley. I'd managed budgets in the tens of millions, negotiated with venture capitalists, turned my mother's garage startup into a company worth $200 million. I hadn't lost those skills. I'd just forgotten I had them. Marcus thought I was irrelevant. Jade thought I was pathetic. They were about to learn exactly how wrong they were. The coffee shop 3 blocks from Nexus AI's headquarters smelled like burnt espresso and ambition. I sat in the corner booth, my laptop open, making calls. The first was to my mother's attorney, Richard Santos, who'd handled her estate. "Victoria," he said, his voice warm. "How are you holding up? I need information about my mother's shares. The voting rights, any restrictions on transfer or sale." There was a pause. "You own 40% outright. Full voting rights. Why?" "Marcus is planning to sell the company. I just found out." Richard's tone shifted, became sharper. "Without board approval? Without consulting you as a major shareholder? He's planning to get board approval at the meeting in 2 weeks. He thinks he has the votes." "Does he?" I did the math in my head. The board had 7 members. Marcus controlled 2 directly, his appointments. My mother's old friend Patricia held 1 seat, and she'd always been loyal to the Chen family, but I wasn't sure if that meant me or Marcus. 3 seats were held by venture capital representatives who'd backed us in the early rounds. They'd vote for profit. And Henry held the 7th seat, the tiebreaker. "He thinks so," I admitted. "He's counting on his father to support him." Richard was quiet for a moment. "Your mother anticipated this, you know. Not this specifically, but she worried about what would happen after she was gone. She made provisions." "What kind of provisions?" "She set up a trust that holds an additional 15% of shares. The trustee has discretion to vote those shares or transfer them based on what's in the company's best interest." "The trustee is Henry." My breath caught. "Henry controls 15% on top of his own 5? "Correct. 20% total. Your mother trusted him to do the right thing." I closed my eyes. My mother had trusted Marcus too, and look where that had gotten us. But Henry was different. He was old school, built his own construction company from the ground up before retiring. He valued honor, legacy. If I could show him what his son was really doing. "Thank you, Richard. I'll be in touch." The next call was to a private investigator I'd found through a discreet Google search. I needed evidence, not just suspicions. Within an hour, I'd hired him to track Marcus's financial movements, his communications with the Chinese firm, any proof of the affair with Jade. The third call was the hardest. I dialed Henry's number, my finger hovering over the button for a full minute before I pressed it. "Victoria," he answered, surprised. "This is unexpected. I need to talk to you. In person. It's about the company. The company is doing well. Marcus tells me the IPO preparations are on track." "It's not an IPO, Henry. It's a sale. Marcus is selling Nexus AI to a Chinese conglomerate and planning to strip the assets." Silence. Then, carefully, "That's a serious accusation. I have proof. Or I will soon. Can we meet?" Another pause. "Tomorrow. My house. 10 a.m. The line went dead. I sat back, my hands shaking. First step taken. Over the next week, I became someone I didn't recognize. The investigators sent daily reports, photos of Marcus and Jade at restaurants I could never afford on my current income, bank statements showing suspicious transfers, emails between Marcus and the Chinese firm discussing timeline and payment structures. Each piece of evidence felt like another nail in a coffin I was building for my old life. But it wasn't just evidence I was gathering. I reached out to former colleagues, people who'd been fired or marginalized since I'd left. Sarah, the head of engineering, who'd been pushed out after disagreeing with Marcus about cutting R&D spending. Tom, the product manager who'd refused to compromise on user privacy features. Lakshmi, the HR director who tried to investigate harassment complaints against Jade. Each conversation followed the same pattern. Initial surprise at hearing from me. Then anger, pouring out stories of how Marcus had changed the company culture, prioritized short-term profits over the innovation my mother had valued. And finally, hope, cautious, fragile hope that maybe things could change. "If you take over, would you bring us back?" Sarah asked during our coffee meeting. "Because this place needs people who actually care about the technology, not just the stock options." "If I take over," I said, "you'll be the first call I make." I visited Henry on a Tuesday morning, driving up to his house in Los Altos Hills, the same house where Marcus had proposed to me 6 years ago, where we'd had family dinners every Sunday when my mother was healthy. Henry opened the door himself, looking older than I remembered. Grief did that, I'd learned. Aged you from the inside out. "Come in," he said gruffly. "Coffee?" We sat in his study, surrounded by photos of his late wife, his sons, his grandchildren that didn't exist because Marcus and I had never gotten around to having kids. Henry's construction company awards lined one wall, a testament to 40 years of building things that lasted. I spread the documents across his desk. Bank transfers, emails, photos. The investigators' report outlining the sale price $60 million, a fraction of the company's real value. Marcus would walk away with his share, leaving investors and employees with nothing. Henry read through everything, his jaw tightening with each page. When he finished, he sat back and removed his reading glasses, rubbing his eyes. "My son," he said finally, "is a goddamn idiot. He's also committing fraud. These transfers to offshore accounts, the kickbacks he's receiving from the buyers, I see it." Henry's voice was flat. "I taught him to be ambitious, to go after what he wanted. But I also taught him honor. Or I thought I did. The board meeting is in 4 days. He's counting on your support." "He won't have it." Henry looked at me, and I saw something fierce in his eyes. "Your mother was one of the finest people I've ever known. She built something revolutionary, and she trusted us, both of us, to protect it. I won't let my son destroy that. I'll vote with you." Relief flooded through me. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Even with my 20% and your 40, that's only 60%. We need a majority of the board to block the sale. Those VC reps will vote for maximum return. And Marcus has his 2 appointees. We need Patricia. Patricia Chen, no relation. Just an unfortunate surname coincidence. She'd been my mother's first investor. Back when Nexus AI was just a pitch deck and a dream. I'd always liked her, respected her sharp mind and sharper questions, but I hadn't spoken to her since the funeral. I found her email in my old contacts and sent a message. Brief, professional, asking for a meeting. She responded within an hour. We met at her office in Palo Alto, a sleek space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Stanford campus. Patricia was in her 60s, silver haircut in a sharp bob, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my car. "Victoria," she said, gesturing to a chair. "I was sorry to hear about your mother. She was a remarkable woman. Thank you. I appreciate you seeing me. Your email mentioned concerns about the company direction. I assume this is about the acquisition." I blinked. "You know about it?" "Marcus presented it to me informally last week. Wanted to gauge my support before the official board vote." She leaned back, studying me. "He said you were on board with the sale, that you wanted to liquidate and move on." My hands clenched. Of course he had. That's a lie. I found out about the sale by accident. Marcus has been planning this behind my back, and he's been systematically destroying my reputation to make sure no one listens if I object. I showed her the TikTok videos, the social media campaign Jade had orchestrated. Patricia's expression darkened as she scrolled through the posts. "This is character assassination," she said quietly. "It's also just the beginning. Marcus isn't just selling the company, he's selling it for pennies on the dollar to a firm that's paying him kickbacks. He's committing fraud, and he's using my grief over my mother as cover." I laid out the evidence, the same documents I'd shown Henry. Patricia read through everything with the focused attention of someone who'd spent decades evaluating investment opportunities. When she finished, she set the papers aside and looked at me directly. "What's your plan?" "Stop the sale. Take control of the company. Return it to the principles my mother founded it on. And then? Build it. Properly this time. My mother always said Nexus AI could be more than a chatbot platform, it could be a tool for genuine human connection, for breaking down communication barriers. Marcus has been cutting R&D, firing our best engineers, chasing quarterly profits. I want to invest in innovation again." Patricia nodded slowly. "Your mother said the same things. She also said that you were the best CFO she'd ever worked with, and she'd worked with plenty." She paused. "She called me, 2 weeks before she died, told me she was worried about what would happen to the company. Asked me to watch out for you." My throat tightened. "I didn't know that. She made me promise not to interfere unless you asked for help. Said you needed time to grieve, to find yourself again." Patricia smiled slightly. "I think she'd be happy you found yourself. Does that mean you'll vote with me?" "It means I'll vote for what's right. Which in this case happens to align with your interests." She stood, extending her hand. "Thursday's meeting should be interesting." I spent the next 3 days in a blur of preparation. Richard helped me draft shareholder resolutions. Sarah and the other former employees agreed to attend the board meeting as witnesses, ready to testify about Marcus's mismanagement. The investigator delivered his final report, 50 pages of evidence that Marcus had been embezzling company funds for over a year. The night before the meeting, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my mother, about the nights we'd worked together in her garage office, fueled by terrible coffee and the belief that we could build something meaningful. She'd been my best friend, my mentor, my hero. And I'd left her company in the hands of someone who saw it as nothing more than an asset to be liquidated. I got out of bed and opened my laptop, pulling up the video of my mother's last keynote speech at a tech conference. She'd been sick already, though nobody knew it yet. In the video, she talked about legacy, about building things that outlasted us. Technology isn't about the code, she said to the audience. It's about what the code enables. Connection. Understanding. Progress. When I'm gone, I hope Nexus AI continues to stand for those principles. I hope the people who run it remember that profit is a result, not a purpose. I closed the laptop, her words echoing in my head. Tomorrow, I would make sure her legacy survived. The board meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. in the main conference room, the same room where my mother had pitched her first major investor, where I'd presented my first quarterly report as CFO. The same room where I'd announced my resignation 4 years ago, choking on tears as I explained I had to take care of my mother. I arrived early, wearing a suit I'd bought specifically for this day. Navy blue, perfectly tailored, the kind of armor I'd worn in my old life. My hair was pulled back, makeup minimal. I looked like the CFO I'd been, not the grieving daughter Marcus and Jade had tried to portray on social media. The receptionist did a double take when she saw me. "Miss Chen, I didn't know you were coming." "Shareholders' privilege," I said pleasantly. "I believe I'm entitled to attend board meetings." She stammered something about checking with Mr. Chen, but I was already walking past her, my heels clicking on the marble floor. The security guard who'd escorted me last time started to step forward, then seemed to think better of it. Something in my expression, maybe. Or maybe he'd been one of the long-time employees who remembered when I'd belonged here. The conference room was already filling up when I entered. Board members taking their seats, Marcus at the head of the table looking confident in his expensive suit. Jade sat off to the side, supposedly there to take notes but really there to support him. Their faces when they saw me were priceless. "Victoria," Marcus said, recovering quickly. "This is a pleasant surprise. I didn't realize you were interested in attending board meetings." "I'm a 40% shareholder," I replied, taking the empty seat directly across from him. I should probably start acting like it. I set my briefcase on the table, the sound sharp in the sudden silence. Jade was staring at me with barely concealed hostility. Patricia gave me a small nod. Henry sat stone-faced, his expression unreadable. Marcus cleared his throat. "Well, since you're here, you can hear about the exciting opportunity we'll be voting on today. As you know, we've been preparing for an IPO. You've been preparing to sell the company to Quantum Solutions International for $60 million, I interrupted, which is roughly 30% of its actual market value, in exchange for kickbacks and offshore payments that constitute securities fraud. The room went silent. Marcus's confident expression cracked. "That's... Victoria, I don't know what you think you know, but I know everything." I opened my briefcase and began distributing packets to each board member. Bank transfers. Emails with Quantum Solutions. The consulting fees they've been paying to your LLC. The private investigator's report documenting your affair with Miss Park and the company resources you've used to support it. All of it. Jade stood up abruptly. "This is ridiculous. You can't just come in here and..." "Sit down, Miss Park," Patricia said coldly. "You're not a board member. You're here as a courtesy, and that courtesy has just expired." "Marcus?" One of the VC reps was flipping through the packet, his face pale. "Is this true? Have you been negotiating a sale without board approval?" "It was preliminary. Just exploring options." "These emails are dated 6 months ago," another board member said. "You've been planning this for half a year while telling us you were preparing for an IPO?" "The IPO was always the backup plan. The backup plan to stealing the company," I said. "Quantum Solutions isn't buying Nexus AI to operate it. They're buying it to strip the assets, fire 70% of the staff, and absorb our chatbot technology into their existing platform. You've been selling off my mother's legacy piece by piece, And you were going to walk away with millions while our employees ended up unemployed. Henry spoke for the first time, his voice hard. Is this true, Marcus? Marcus looked at his father, and something desperate flashed across his face. Dad, I can explain. Is it true? The company needs fresh direction. Victoria's mother was brilliant, but her vision was limited. We could never grow beyond a certain point with her at the helm, and Victoria was just following the same path. I was trying to maximize value for everyone. By committing fraud? Patricia's voice was sharp. By lying to the board. By paying yourself illegal kickbacks. I deserve to be compensated for my work. I built this company from a garage startup to a real business. I brought in the sales, the clients, the revenue. You built nothing, I said, and my voice was steady even though my hands were shaking. My mother built this company. I managed the finances that kept it stable through 3 recessions. Our engineers created the technology. Our employees believed in the mission. You sold. That's all you ever did sell. And now you're trying to sell the company itself. Marcus stood up, his face flushed with anger. You have no right to judge me. You abandoned this company. You walked away. To take care of my dying mother. My voice cracked. I spent 4 years watching her fade away, holding her hand through chemo, making sure her last days had some dignity. And you swore you'd protect what she built. You looked me in the eye at her funeral and promised you'd honor her legacy. I am honoring it. By making sure it survives. By destroying everything she believed in. I pulled out one more document, my hand steady now. This is my mother's last letter to the board. She wrote it 3 weeks before she died and gave it to her attorney to hold until it was needed. I think now qualifies. I began to read, my mother's words filling the conference room. To the board of Nexus AI. If you're reading this, something has gone wrong. I built this company because I believed technology should serve humanity, not exploit it. I believed profit should be a byproduct of value creation, not the end goal. I believed in innovation, integrity, and the power of people working together towards something meaningful. If those principles are at risk, I'm asking you to remember why you joined this board. Not for the money, not for the prestige, but because you believed in the mission. Please don't let it die with me. The silence that followed was absolute. One of the VC reps, a woman named Lisa who'd been my mother's second investor, wiped her eyes. I vote to reject the sale, Patricia said firmly. And to open an investigation into Mr. Chen's conduct as COO. I second, Henry said, not looking at his son. Third, Lisa added. The other board members fell in line, one by one, their votes crushing Marcus's plan. When it was done, he stood frozen at the head of the table, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. There's one more item, I said. I'm calling for a vote to remove Marcus Chen as COO, effective immediately, and to install an interim management team to be led by myself as CEO and Sarah Patel, who many of you remember as our former head of engineering. You can't do this, Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. I can. I'm the largest single shareholder, and I have the support of the board. I looked around the table. All in favor? Every hand went up except Marcus's own 2 appointees, who seemed too stunned to move. Motion carries. I turned to Marcus. You're fired. Security will escort you from the building. Your severance will be determined after the fraud investigation is complete, but I wouldn't hold your breath for much. Marcus's face went through a series of emotions, shock, rage, disbelief. Finally, he looked at his father. Dad, you're really going to let her do this? Henry met his son's gaze, and his expression was carved from stone. I taught you that loyalty is everything, but I also taught you honor. You can't have both, Marcus. Not after what you've done. Security arrived then, real security, not the friendly guard from before. As they led Marcus out, he passed Jade, who'd been sitting frozen in her chair. He didn't even look at her. I turned to Jade, who was gathering her things with shaking hands. Miss Park. A moment. She looked up, defiant despite her obvious fear. I don't work for you. Actually, you do. I'm the CEO now. I smiled, and it wasn't kind. I've been reviewing the org chart. We don't need a head of marketing right now. Marcus inflated that position as a favor to you. But we do need someone to manage our social media presence. Entry level. I'm offering you a position as our social media intern. Her mouth fell open. You're demoting me. I'm offering you a job. You wanted to make things trend, Jade. You wanted the algorithm. Well, now you can work with it every day. From the intern desk. I paused. Oh. And you'll report directly to Lakshmi in HR. You remember Lakshmi, the woman you tried to get fired for investigating harassment complaints against you? Jade's face went white. I quit. That's your choice. But you should know that I've already filed complaints with the labor board about your abuse of company resources for personal social media campaigns. Quitting won't make that go away. I gathered my materials. Think about it. Either way. Enjoy the algorithm, Jade. She stormed out, and I let her go. The board meeting dissolved into discussions of next steps, investigations, interim management structure. Henry caught my arm as I was leaving. Victoria, he said quietly. I'm sorry. If I'd paid more attention, if I'd questioned Marcus's decisions, you believed in your son. That's not a crime. I squeezed his hand. And when it mattered, you chose what was right over what was easy. That's honor. His eyes were bright with unshed tears. Your mother would be proud of you. I hope so. Over the next weeks, I learned that reclaiming a company was harder than taking it over. There were investigations to cooperate with the SEC was very interested in Marcus's offshore accounts. There were employees to rehire, strategies to rebuild, investor relationships to repair, but there were good moments too. Sarah's face when I called to offer her the Chief Technology Officer position. The company-wide email announcing our return to R&D investment. The first board meeting where I presented a 5-year plan focused on innovation instead of quarterly profits. And there was the live stream. Someone I never found out who had recorded the entire board meeting on their phone and posted it to Twitter. Within 48 hours, it had 3 million views. Comments poured in. This is the content I'm here for. She destroyed him with facts. Enjoy the algorithm is the best mic drop I've ever heard. I didn't respond to any of them. The vindication felt good, but it wasn't why I'd done it. I'd done it for my mother, for the employees who'd believed in her vision, for the technology that deserved better than to be sold for parts. 6 months later, I stood in front of my mother's grave on what would have been her 65th birthday. The headstone was simple, Margaret Chen, builder of things that mattered. We did it, Mom, I said to the granite marker. The company's back on track. We're hiring again, investing in the technology you loved. Sarah says we're 6 months from a breakthrough on multilingual emotional recognition, the thing you always said would change everything. The wind rustled through the trees. A bird called somewhere overhead. Marcus is under investigation. Jade went to work for some startup in Austin. Henry's still on the board. He asks about you sometimes, tells stories. I think he misses you. I knelt down, brushing leaves off the grave. I miss you too. Every day. But I'm okay now. Better than okay. I paused. I learned something these past months. You taught me to be a CFO, to run a company, to think strategically. But the most important thing you taught me was that silence isn't weakness. It's preparation. While they were laughing, I was planning. While they thought I was broken, I was getting stronger. I stood, brushing off my knees. The sun was setting, painting the cemetery in amber light. I have to go. Board meeting tomorrow. But I'll be back next week. I always am. As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Prototype works. You need to see this. I smiled. My mother had built something that mattered. And now so would I. The next morning, I woke up early and went for a run. Something I'd started doing again. My route took me past Nexus AI's headquarters. And I stopped for a moment, looking up at the building. The sign my mother had designed still hung above the entrance, simple, elegant, permanent. Inside that building, people were working on technology that would help humans understand each other better. Connect more deeply. Communicate across barriers of language and culture. It wasn't just about profit anymore. It was about purpose. I thought about the girl I'd been 4 years ago, walking away from this building with tears streaming down my face. How lost I'd felt. How certain I was that I'd never find my way back to the person I'd been. I'd been wrong. I hadn't found my way back to who I was. I'd found my way forward to who I was meant to be. Stronger. Wiser. Carrying my mother's legacy not as a burden but as a gift. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Sarah. Also, that tech blog wants an interview. About the comeback story of the year. Your call. I thought about it for a moment, then typed back. Tell them I'll do it. but only if they focus on the technology, not the drama. Her response was immediate, deal. Also, you're a badass. I laughed and started running again, my feet hitting the pavement in a steady rhythm. Behind me, the sun rose over Silicon Valley, painting everything gold. Ahead of me, the future waited uncertain, challenging, full of possibility. And this time, I was ready for it.